What's up, Degroote? Welcome to your weekly NBA Bizcast, where we provide you with information that you need to know. We provide weekly highlights in tech, business, sports, and any other interesting stories we come across. Listen while you work, study, drive, or even on your break. Today's Monday, November 5th. I'm going to head right over to Alex with the community news. What's up, Alex?
Thanks, Connor. This week we got lots going on as per usual in the Degroote community. Tonight, make sure to make it out for the NBA Finance Association's election forum. They'll be covering the implications of the upcoming United States election. This Wednesday, there are actually two events going on. We have a Women in Management event starting at 5:30, as well as the Alumni Insights Workshop being put on by the NBA Marketing Association, where you'll have a chance to sit down with alumni who work in marketing and learn more about the industry. If you'd like to go to both, you can always go to the WMA event first and come out for the networking event at the Alumni Insights Workshop after in the KPMG Lounge. Be sure to register for both of those on Oscar Plus. Other than the associational events, we do have a communications workshop being put on by CBCD on Thursday. Just register on Oscar Plus for that as well. Rockwood is going to be going on this Friday, so get tickets or bracelets from any of the other social people. Either I think Will or G or Sammy T.
Yeah.
Other than that, Capital Markets Conference will be on Saturday as well. So if you are up for it after Rockwood, be sure to make it out. In terms of tickets, just remember, fashion show tickets are now on sale, so make sure your family and friends are buying them as well. Tickets for formal can be bought from Joey Fotia, so just find them around the building. They're $80 a piece, and make sure to get them soon. Back to Connor.
So this week, we have a little bit of a different format for you guys than usual. We actually have a special guest, and we've brought in Carlos. How's it going, Carlos?
What's up, Degroote?
So this week, it's going to be a little bit more of a roundtable discussion, and we've got three main topics to talk about. So the first one is the shift of physical to digital publications. Our second topic is government intervention with deals. And then the third topic is on the lighter side about the NHL lockout. I'm going to hand it over to Tunde. Tunde, why don't you start us off?
So, with the recent news about Newsweek, I don't know if you guys have all heard this. Newsweek decided, I think it's as of this year, no more physical copies, all digital, subscription-based model through, I think, the iTunes App Store, as well as maybe the Google Play Store, and as well, of course, online through your web browser, completely phasing out all their magazines. And my question to you guys is, would you subscribe to a digital magazine?
No.
Probably not.
Like, never.
Definitely not.
Not tomorrow, that's for sure. I mean,
why not?
For one, there's still the physical magazines out there. I'd rather hold it in my hand if I can. Like, I'd rather be able to flip through the pages than just kind of scroll around on a page with a screen burning out my eyes. And I mean, hopefully that's not the only option in the future.
Yeah, I spend enough time looking at my computer screen doing homework as is. I don't need to stare at it even more. I read newspapers and magazines as my break from staring at my computer screen.
See, one of my problems is I don't really find it comfortable to read on a laptop.
Yeah.
Or any kind of screen. Like, I've never used, for a long period of time, one of those like e-readers. Like, maybe if I was using like a Kindle or something, but then I would have no color and there'd be no pictures. So then I lose the whole magazine aspect. I might as well be reading a textbook about accounting.
See, I love my Kindle, but yeah, in terms of a magazine, like color, pictures, all that kind of stuff, once you start backlighting it, it takes away from the ease on the eyes. So I don't know. I don't see myself being big on it. I did notice this week, actually, that the Globe and Mail has followed suit and started charging subscription for all the content that was free 2 weeks ago. So it looks like this has kind of started a bit of a landslide in the publishing economy.
Well, we were having the conversation earlier, Connor, about how you remember when...
Yeah, like 5-10 years ago, when you'd be researching homework or for assignments and you were completely locked out of any newspaper website unless you paid for it. Then suddenly it was free, and it was like, oh wow, all this media and content that I have access to that I didn't before, now I have to start paying for it again, and I'm really too cheap to pay for it.
I think the crazy part is you look at stuff that's online and it's completely free, and I can't be sitting in a Google search and look at two results, and one is like, to see these results, click here. One's like, to see these results, click here, give me $5.99 and your credit card number, and I'll tell you what President Barack Obama had at some peace conference. Like, I don't understand how anyone's going to pay for news in parallel with free news of equal or better quality. Like,
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, the business model today is changing. Back in the day, people used to get their news primarily from the newspaper or in magazines. That's where people got all their news stories. Now, that type of content is available everywhere on the internet. You can access through your iPod, Kindle, smartphone, anything, and this information is readily available. And so there's less value add now in newspaper and print magazines, for consumers to consume because that information is available.
Do you think it'd be different? Like, would you be more willing to subscribe to something that was all personal interest versus actual real news? Because Newsweek is mostly real news. There are some interest stories, but it's mostly political and government and financial news. So why would you, I wouldn't pay for that, but I would pay for maybe personal stories or interest stories. Like, I'd be more willing to pay for GQ online than Newsweek online.
Well, you know what? We might not be that far away where a magazine or some sort of subscription tailors all the news stories that you find interesting into one publication online, and you might be willing to pay for something more like that as opposed to a magazine where maybe only some of the stories and interests pertain to you.
That right there sounds like a good business idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that kind of reminds me of how Flipboard works, right? You can set up your Flipboard. You guys ever use the app?
No.
It's an app for Android and iOS. You set up an account, ask you what your favorite things are, your favorite websites. You plug in all this data, and then it generates this little flip chart looking thing. It's really all very slick looking, and it's all your favorite articles, all your favorite topics. The only problem with it is it's not consistent. So sometimes let's say I put in the Globe and Mail, but for Globe and Mail articles, it jumps you out to their website, and then it's just completely jarring. You go to their website, you can't navigate. Sometimes it doesn't land you on the same page you were looking at. Doesn't make any sense. But that's basically where we could go, and the personalization could make people want to pay for a subscription.
But I suppose at the end of the day, it makes sense to make the transition because, like Carlos just said, most people used to get their news from the newspaper. They used to buy a paper each day. They used to have a subscription. If that's falling, the economies of scale are going to dictate that they can't afford to do it anymore. So just based on that, they're going to be forced to make this move to digital, and they're still going to need to pay the bills and pay the journalists. So, I mean, we could kind of fight it, but I feel like at a certain point we're going to have to bite the bullet and just make this jump anyways. But I think it obviously has a lot of potential to change the way we get our news. So, I mean, it could be a bad thing for some people. I'm sure there will be enough grandparents unhappy about this change. But I think overall, I think it's probably going to be an empowering thing. Hopefully people stay more informed than they were in the past. But I think it's going to be a turbulent couple of years in that industry.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And for newspapers and print magazines, it's not a matter of if they're going to stop publishing. It's just a matter of when. Mm-hmm. And Newsweek's already made that jump. And all newspapers and other publications, as soon as they can't sustain that business model anymore, they're going to have to make a similar choice or face bankruptcy.
So I think we're all pretty much in agreement that we don't really want to read on our computers. But would you be more willing to read a digital publication if you were reading it on a phone or a tablet? Is there a mode that you think is going to come to where you'll actually want to be able to read digital publications?
I think the phone would probably be my least likely location to read it. As big as the screen is on my phone, I think it's like a 5-inch screen. It's just way too small to be moving around all the time. I'd rather have as much text as possible.
I read on my phone, actually. I have one of the Galaxies. I read on it a lot. But I don't find that I'm particularly effective reading on it. I think I'd be able to cover more news if I had a better medium. I think a tablet is really what's needed, but not everyone can own a tablet and a laptop. At least not yet.
I'm in that same boat too. I do my news reading on my laptop when I do my news reading. Otherwise, I'm getting it from the television, really.
Yeah, I still think I prefer TV. Now that you bring it up, I prefer TV to any digital news. I just like someone to tell me what the deal is, and if I disagree or want more information, then I'll hit the internet. That's just my basic thoughts on it.
All right, so let's move on to our next topic. Government intervening with the deals.
So this whole thing came from, in a span of 2 or 3 weeks, I think you were covering the Petronas deal that fell apart. There was the Nexen deal that's been extended now for a third straight extension. The government's on their final deadline. And then somewhere in between there, Bell tried to buy Astro Media. That deal got shut down as well. So we have a big rash of government intervention all of a sudden. And what most people would say is a pretty open society. We're not quite as open as the U.S. model, where it's kind of like, free enterprise, do whatever you want. But I feel like it would surprise most people. Do you think it's a step in the right direction, Alex?
I honestly, I'm not sure how to feel about the interventions. I mean, the BCE Astral deal, I feel that telecom in Canada is already pretty concentrated. Concentrating it more might cause problems. I mean, obviously, anyone here who's dealt with Rogers or Bell or TELUS before can say that there's not a lot of bargaining power on the end of the consumers when it comes to dealing with the cell phone companies. So I mean, in that case, I'm a little bit more lenient. The other ones, in terms of the the global market and how we interact with the world, I mean, it is questionable. We have been known for the last, I guess, 10, 15 years as being one of the open markets left in the oil world. So places like Venezuela and Saudi Arabia, they're so constricted with government intervention already that we have been kind of hailed as the only safe place for multinationals to do business, and now that's obviously changing, and intervention does need to go down. That being said, I do think that you can call it a violation of free trade or free market ideology, but it's not so much when you consider that we can't necessarily go and invest in one of these countries freely, and because of that, it's not free trade. I mean, if we wanted to have a Canadian company buy out Nexon or Progress, there would be nothing stopping it, and there is free trade within Canada, obviously, in that sense. But internationally, I think that there needs to be some sort of halting. Is kind of the consensus I've come to. Not that they're handling it perfectly, but something needs to change in the way that they interact with the global market.
The Canadian government's being a little bit contradictory because I think they're saying, they want to embrace foreign direct investment, they want to welcome it, but at the same time, they're protecting these deals. And part of me agrees with that in that you said we're the only really open market for the oil sands, for that type of market. So maybe it is necessary that we require some sort of protection, particularly if two large companies, energy companies, are being bought out. But at the same time, you can't go out and say you're welcoming foreign direct investment and then start turning away all these companies.
I totally agree. I think that the Conservatives are actually making a huge mistake in not dealing with this faster, because really it just comes down to the fact that they need to make a communicated decision on how they're going to handle these types of deals, and they haven't been able to do that to justify their stance. And they do obviously promote the free market, the free market, the economy. Like Stephen Harper, being an economist, very much all about the lack of intervention, letting Adam Smith's invisible hand do its thing.
The old invisible hand. That's the greatest theory ever. The greatest name for a theory ever, invisible hand.
I did read that the Conservative government at 11:57, 3 minutes before the midnight deadline, in responding to one of those deals, said that it didn't provide a net benefit to Canada and they couldn't make a decision yet. Yeah. That is extremely vague, and the Malaysians thought that they had the deal was going to go through for sure. They're already drafting a press release.
The Petronas deal?
Yeah. They're already drafting a press release to announce the finishing of the deal.
Yeah, I have no idea why at the last second they kind of jumped in on that one. I will say, though, that net benefit thing, we talked about it last week or a couple weeks ago. I looked everywhere on the internet. I still have not found a clear and honest definition from the federal government on what a net benefit is, because a lot of these deals someone is going to pay money into the Canadian economy. They're going to expand capital. They're going to have additional production. And they're going to have more jobs. So I don't understand what the bad part is that's somehow we're not getting a net benefit. I want to know if they're doing a numbers calculation. Is it a social thing? I have no idea how they determine the net benefit, and they've never once defined it.
Or gross benefit, for that matter.
They give no definitions of anything whatsoever. See, the thing is, going back a little bit, though, to the Nexon deal in particular, I had a conversation with a few people on campus, and there's a few local people who are in support of the government shutting the deal down only because of reciprocity. They say, could we go to China and buy into oil? Could we go to China and buy into agriculture? And the answer is no, we can't do that. And the fact that they're doing state-sponsored companies shows that they're really, really concerned with their national security on those levels. But the answer I kind of got from one guy in particular was think about it as like a negotiation. Are we going to go in and just give up first? I'm like, hey, yeah, you guys can come invest here and hope that they kind of agree, or do we do agreements in place for reciprocity before we approach the whole thing? Because I think most people want the additional capital, but they're just afraid we're going to get taken advantage of.
No, I'm on board with that. That's kind of where I've landed. Like, when I first saw this all unfolding, it was irksome, to say the least, seeing the government get in there and start shutting things down, shaking things up. But that being said, reciprocity is needed. Like, that is the gap between this being free trade or even fair trade between these countries, right? But that being said, the Conservative government, I agree with Carlos, isn't really being effective, especially as a democratically elected representation of Canada. You're not really telling us what we're doing.
So we can tell they've lost your vote. But switching gears back to the Astral deal, I feel the need to mention, I don't know if everyone knows, Astral Media controls a lot of channels in Canada, especially the premium channels, the Movie Network, HBO. I think they have a
big one in the French.
Yeah, they have one of the big French channels. I can't remember what it is right now. I had a list of them before. They also have, I think they have either Showcase or Showtime. One of them they have distribution rights for in Canada. They control a huge amount of channels, a huge amount of content. People don't understand how much Bell would have if they had that content. Because the main reason the deal got shut down, too, isn't even because of consumer. Because most consumers are unaware. It's lobbying on behalf of Rogers, TELUS, Cogeco, Shaw, Videotron. All those guys were lobbying huge. I remember when I first moved to Hamilton to start the program, I finally started watching Cogeco. And the commercials run nonstop. Talk to your local MP, write an email, stop Bell from buying Astral.
So the CRTC came out and blocked this deal because Bell would have controlled, I think, over the 35% threshold that they have of Canadian content.
Now, were they moving past it, or were they getting close to it? Because I thought I remember.
I think they were getting close to it, and the Bell's calculations included that of the American competitors, whereas the CRTC's calculations only really included purely Canadian content. Now, I think that's interesting, and you mentioned something earlier when you said they're doing it to protect the Canadian consumers of digital content. Now, Bell went out and said that if they had acquired Astral Media, that they would provide a competitor to Netflix. We would have our own Canadian version of Netflix. Now, to me, that sounds like it would be pretty good. Not only are you bringing a new competitor to the market, but really Netflix is kind of the only digital content in that particular space. So I think it would be somewhat beneficial, at least from that perspective. And if it's only at 35% or 40%, what's the difference between having 25% or 35% content that you own in Canada? Is it that significant?
Yes, the difference between 25 and 35 isn't too bad, but then it just starts to turn into the race of who can acquire the next company, and then it turns into Coke versus Pepsi, Rogers versus Bell. And I don't know, being an economist, I just like having more different separate entities competing with each other. It keeps prices lower for the consumer, and it also forces companies to create higher quality goods to outcompete one another. So from a Netflix perspective, that's very interesting. I just think that's one small piece of a big puzzle.
Well, okay, speaking on Netflix, though, the one thing that I'm not sure of, I'm not sure they actually would have made it fully competitive. Because I don't know if you know this, maybe not even 2 years ago, I think it's last year, when Netflix started to increase their content and started showing more current shows and shows that are currently being aired, Bell and Rogers are actually lobbying the CRTC to treat them as a broadcast network, then thus requiring them to pay different taxes, different schedule of taxes, and requiring them to have they want them to have a minimum Canadian content guideline, which would reduce what they could actually show from the American content. And now everyone's already complained that Netflix content is not up to date with around the world. This would severely cripple them. So I don't know if they actually would do the right thing for Canadians, because if they're in one hand saying, "Oh, we want to stream," the other hand, like, let's shut down all streaming. Like, are they just shutting it down because they don't like Netflix's streaming model, or they don't want them to be competing here, or are they actually going to make a true competitor? You'd have to be taking it on faith of Bell. I think the deal should not have been shut down. Even though I'm happy it was shut down, technically, if you make up a set of rules and they don't break those rules, and you do the calculations and you do all the tests and they're within the rules, it's bad for consumers. But that's good business on Bell's part. So I don't understand why they shut the deal down, but I'm glad they did, because I think Bell would abuse that power. I'm not ready to trust them yet with every premium channel in the country.
No, you're right. And you bring up a good point when you said when Netflix is coming to compete, I'm sure Bell and Rogers did everything they could to ruin their business model so they can make less profits. And you're right, that is not in the best interest of the Canadian consumer. Exactly. So at the end of the day, it is all about the bottom line. And it's about profits, and what companies can you trust to have a certain percentage of the Canadian content.
Yeah,
I don't know if it is Bell.
I think it's going to be obviously the established players, but it's going to be first through the government giving an assistance to build up a competitive marketplace. And I know this is very contrary to you guys, and you guys are economists and you want a free market. But if the government just gives a little bit of an assistance to level it up a little bit, I think when there's a competitive base, all these companies will go back to the way they were when they were upstarts.
Yeah. All right, shall we move on to our third topic? So, the NHL lockout. This has been pretty much controlling TSN and SportsCenter for the last 3 weeks.
Sad week last week with the Winter Classic being canceled. Yeah. A lot of people who are not happy about that at all.
I saw some figures. They were anticipating 115,000 people at the game, which would be the highest number of people to watch a professional NHL hockey game ever. And then an anticipated 4.3 million viewers online. That's just that one thing is such a huge hit on the NHL, in my opinion.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but did the corporate sponsors and the TV companies that paid for the rights for the game, are those sunk costs now? Did the NHL have those revenues?
So they canceled at the 11th hour, the Winter Classic, because they actually were going to have to start making payments. The NHL was to the venues, to all the logistical things. And the first payment, small amount of money, but I think it was $5 million or something like that. But they didn't want to make the payments. For what the NHL makes, they can give away the $5 million. They didn't want to make the payments, and the sponsors are trying to come after the NHL for some of that money now.
Yeah.
But the NHL, I think, the way their contract was structured, they did give themselves an out. Since they're canceling quite a bit in advance, they might be able to get out with some of the sponsors. But for the broadcast networks, they paid for the rights as part of a package, so I don't think there's any recourse for them at all. So unless they find a way to get recourse over the whole season being canceled, if they just miss that game, then the networks and the advertisers are screwed.
Yeah, it's a terrible. Yeah, this is day 50 of the lockout now, and you people are asking, are you on the side of the players, are you on the side of the business owners? But really, at the end of the day, it's got to be about the fans. I mean, every day I hear about committed NHL fans who are now so fed up that they'll watch the NFL, they'll watch the NBA, and they don't even care if the NHL comes back on at this point. They're just so frustrated with the whole thing. And you got to think Gary Bettman is shooting himself a little bit in the foot here, losing some fans to other sports in the league.
Especially when you consider how few Americans watch the sport as is. Now this is just people's excuse to stop watching. As Canadians, as Torontonians, let's be honest, no one's going to stop watching it here. But from a business perspective, I think you're going to lose a lot of American viewership.
The fringe fans who will watch the NHL, but they're not your Toronto hockey fan. Those are the people that you're going to lose, and those are the people that you need to sustain the sport in the league.
And sustain growth. I think last year was their biggest year ever. I think they made over $3 billion as a league, and I'll be interested to see how much that drops following this. I think they've already missed over 300 games this season, so they're losing revenue there. In every way, it seems just so damaging to the sport.
So I just want to go back and look at a couple previous things. The first is, since he's become commissioner, Gary Bettman, I think, has canceled something like 12,000 hockey games.
Oh my God.
Something insane. And he's canceled more games than anyone ever.
In any sports league?
2,000? I'm a little bit wrong. It's 2,000. I thought, was it?
It just went over the 2,000
mark.
Over
the 2,000 mark.
Years.
And I think everyone else combined has canceled what? Less than half that?
I'm not positive on that.
Because the NFL, they only do 16 game season, but I think every other league combined has canceled less than half of what he's canceled alone in his tenure. One full season lost, a shortened season, and on the verge of losing another full season right now. He has definitely got to be the most polarizing commissioner in all of sports, because I'm sure anyone who's a billionaire loves this guy because he's willing to crush and break the spirits of any players who step in his way. But you're losing so much money.
It would be interesting to well, I guess we'll never know, but It'd be nice to see if there was someone else in his position, would anything be different? Is the situation so poisonous and toxic that the players and the owners can't come to an agreement that they're so far away, or is it really under the stewardship of Gary Bettman that really, over 2,000 games have been canceled?
I actually think it's not that much Bettman's fault as much as I mock him. I was watching Sportsnet Primetime Sports actually, maybe Thursday last week, and they actually had a couple insiders say, yes, he is in favor of the lockout, and he was in favor of the last lockout, but he doesn't have the controlling power. There's still a vote, and the problem is that I think there's 7 or 8 owners who make a lot of money. They just don't care whatsoever. They're there, but they'll vote long landing because they don't care. The situation means nothing to them. And then there's a few owners who are in the middle. They have some struggles. They do want a better system. And then there's the really, really poor owners poor being relative, poor teams who are mad that their teams don't make as much money. Their teams lose money, and they're demanding that the lockout happen. And those guys happen to be closer to Bettman. I think they've built that relationship with Bettman, and they're forcing this. But if you I was looking at what happened in 2004, 2005. So the main thing they wanted then was the cap. They wanted the cap. They wanted to change free agency. They wanted to change a bunch of the rules try to control player salaries. Now the players actually came to them. Their last proposal was a $45 million hard cap that wouldn't have moved for the whole CBA, and the owners turned it down. Can you believe that? Like today, $45 million they would kill for because they're at 60 right now.
I think actually, if this year was to be played, I think the cap was going to just top over 70 for the first time. I think the league proposed to bring it down to 58.
Yeah.
And the players, that's what kind of started off this whole battle.
Yeah, no. So the players said, "Hey, we'll play for 45 fixed for 8 years," and the owners said, "No, we want 38." And they said, "Okay, we'll give you 38, but we have to have a little bit of difference on free agency. We got to be able to get out earlier because we're not going to have our money making years." And the owners were like, "That seems okay," which was a terrible idea. And then they said, "Oh, but we'll take even less than 38 if you just let it. If you guys make more money, can we have a little bit more of this small structure?" I don't know if the league's lawyers just didn't catch this, or if the league just thought that they would be able to control themselves, because it all comes down to still owners controlling themselves. And what's been shown is owners have no self-control. Like, as soon as the structure came on, they made more money. The cap went up. Was there anyone who was like, "I'm going to keep control"? No, people just started spending huge amounts, giving out $100 million contracts. They tried to button it up, and then the agents who are smart were like, "Hey, if we just backload these contracts, we'll give this guy a 15-year deal where he makes $1 million a year for the last 6 years, and he's 47 and sitting at home. We can get around the whole maximum structure for the cap."
It's just loopholes.
Yeah, and I can't believe that the owners, with their wealth, with their combined success, didn't have a legal team that was able to see these loopholes. Like, doesn't that shock you?
Yeah.
$45 million fixed cap they could have had. We'd be watching hockey today.
Yeah. And it's extremely frustrating because even today on TSN, it's still the biggest percentage of coverage is on hockey and the lockout. You hear, breaking news, they met till 1 a.m., and it's just like
nothing
was concluded.
I want to see what else is going on, in the sports world.
Well, TSN started showing movies too now. They showed Caddyshack the other day.
Yeah.
Like, they're desperate to put anything on TV. They're missing.
There's so many sports in the world. Yet TSN is pulling these obscure hockey games from like
KHL.
They'll find like KHL. They'll find middle of nowhere in a desert hockey game, and they'll air that before they're airing other sports, which I think is weird. Like I don't know. I think that's what Sportsnet has over SportsCenter. Sportsnet, they're pretty good about covering a variety of sports, and TSN's just too honed in on hockey.
Well, let's not forget one key thing, right? Broadcast rights are negotiated in blocks of time in advance. So that's why TSN is kind of screwed, because they went and fought really hard to dominate the hockey rights. They got the Hockey Night theme song. They got Wednesday Night Hockey set up. They got Friday Night Hockey set up. So, and then they also have Tuesday nights. Like, they got themselves 3 nights, and if the league was on, they'd be enjoying massive exclusivity in hockey and be dominating ratings like they were last year. So that's what's one of their problems.
Okay.
And they're owned. Another problem is they're owned by the Bell Group. So some content that they might be able to show, Bell is showing on other channels. So they can't. They're kind of handcuffed in that kind of.
Okay, interesting.
That's why Rogers has had more flexibility over the lockout. But just to kind of wrap this up, I want to ask you guys about the latest issue they're fighting over. It's called the make whole provision. So if they cut salaries, they cut the cap, and they reduce everything, how are they going to pay the players back? How do you think they can get it done, Alex?
Well, what do you mean by make whole? You mean like honor the contracts that are existing right now?
So the players want contracts to be honored,
Yeah.
but the owners say we will honor it, but not during the season. But how can they honor it from revenue? Like, they haven't explained how. Do you honestly think that's a possibility?
I think that's a really difficult question to answer, which sounds like they have not answered.
Yeah.
So, if I were the players, I think I'd feel the exact same way. I feel that sounds fishy. I feel that the players probably are in the right in waiting to get an actual answer on how their contracts are going to be honored going forward.
Do you think the contracts that just got signed, like, because I think Zach Parise, the two big ones this summer, $100 million for Zach Parise, $100 million for Ryan Suter, happened about 2 weeks before the lockout, maybe a month before the lockout. Do you think those contracts should still be valid, or should they be voided?
Without a doubt.
Let those guys be free agents.
Without a doubt, they should definitely be valid. Like, they're contracts. If you start, adjusting contracts based on context, that's not okay.
Why have a contract at all?
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with Alex. It's very skeptical. Unless it's laid out perfectly in writing, exactly, the payment structure of how they're going to pay the players, then that's really the only time and place you can agree with it. And I don't know if they've gotten to that point of defining it. It almost brings you right back to the Canadian government talking about their net benefit, and that is not really defined either. So it seems to me, much like the conservative Canadian government and the NHL, is they're just using this as a delay ploy, to kind of confuse everybody, to be like, okay, well, is this something that we want to go ahead with or not? And if it's not defined, then it seems like it's just a scapegoat.
It's hard to disagree with a stance that doesn't really exist.
Yeah. There is one positive, I think, that we can draw from all of this, and I came to this realization. The World Junior Hockey Championships now will feature many Canadian players which would have been playing in the NHL otherwise and wouldn't be able to participate in the World
I didn't
Juniors.
even think about that. Yeah. We'll have like top level talent they did in 2004, 2005.
Exactly. With the exception of Nugent Hopkins, who is playing somewhere, I think, in Europe. He's the only professional player right now, but everyone else would be eligible to play.
So can we actually win it this year then?
So we might, but at the same time, it's the same for all the other countries. So you might find a more competitive World Junior Hockey Classic.
And I find it pretty exciting as is. Now with
Yes.
even higher level,
Yeah.
it should be a good series then.
So I mean, the internal optimist in me has got to bring that up and take a positive from this.
That's good for us to finally end on a good note. The last couple of times it's been like ending on me butchering Ari's wonderful writing.
Yeah.
Ari, once
Well, you
again.
need me in more, I guess.
Hey.
Light, keeping things light.
That's why we brought you here.
So just wanted to thank you, Carlos, for coming in and providing some of your wonderful insight. It's nice chatting with you. Do you have any final messages that you want to share with our audience?
Thank you guys for having me on. I think you guys are doing an amazing job. I think this is going to go a long way in terms of the way communication is changing and how we can reach the students and have the students really have another method of content that they can consume from Degroote for Degroote. So I think that's a great and good job to you guys for doing so. You already mentioned Formal and Fashion Show. Those are going to be great events. I'd encourage everyone to buy tickets for that. And also, I know you can't see me right now, but I'm trying to sport a weak Mexican-style mustache right now. You guys need to support the Movember, the Degroote team. So if you can, make a $5, $10 donation to the Degroote team or grow a mustache yourself. Alex is already kicking my ass. I don't know if I can say that on radio, but it's looking good if you people listening could see it right now.
Alex, is that like a day's worth of growth?
I'm blushing over here, guys. I'm just trying to make my dad proud.
So thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at What's Up Degroote and like us on Facebook. If you want to contact us directly, email whatsupdegroote@gmail.com with any questions or comments you have. This is What's Up Degroote signing off to go trim and sculpt our Movember mustaches.